Last week I made a couple of these t-shirts and, well, there was questions about some of my technique. I also have quite a bit of this buttery soft, nice thick jersey left over. And I want some long sleeve t-shirts. So let me see if we can both get something out of this video. Yeah? In terms of the pattern, you can either buy one, download one off of freesewing.org or other free websites. Or if you want to learn how to draft the actual pattern, buy a cheap one at the thrift store, take it apart and trace it out, a lot like I did. Although, fair warning, if you go that route, t-shirts do stretch in certain areas, so you might get some odd points underneath the armpits. So just do an image search and cross-reference your pattern with ones on the internet and look for irregularities and boom. I'm going to walk it out around my neck, get a measurement, measure out the other piece, and my pattern already includes the seam allowance. If yours doesn't, add it into the total. Add the two totals together. And now the key with the neck is to always have that rib knit fabric considerably shorter so that it has to stretch and therefore sits nice and flat. I find the magic number is 75%, so we multiply that by 0.75, boom, just under 11.5 inches. And then the height of the neck is simply whatever you want it to be, plus a bit of seam allowance, times 2 because it folds over. So in my case, I'm doing 2¼ inches. Sew the ends together. Press the seams to one side. Put the two ends together and flip it and fold it in half. And then press it one more time into its final shape. A little stretching's not a bad idea, just to keep it all where it should be. I have already sewn and pressed the shoulders. It's inside out. I take that rib knit, find that seam that we did, and align that with the seam on one side. Give that a pin. I stretch out the rib knit just a touch to find the center. Put in that pin as a marker. Do the same thing with the shirt itself. Align these two pins. Take one out and simply pin it into place. Now I stretch out both the collar and the shirt and roughly find the center. And then repeat again on the other side. And now I just check to make sure that the gap in the fabric here between the pins is roughly the same amount. And I think we're going to have to adjust it a little bit. Just pull that over a touch. All right. Now we slide it all underneath the presser foot. Take your time. Go nice and slow. There's no need to rush here. Make sure everything is laying flat and stretch it enough so that this is lying flat. And yes, the rib knit is going to be stretching quite a bit. And then finally, I like to run a zigzag stitch on the outside of the shirt. And this is to keep the shirt and the collar in place nicer. But also the reason for the zigzag as opposed to a straight stitch is so that it doesn't rip when you pull it over your big noggin. Now, like most things in life, there's many ways of doing the same thing, so let me show you one more technique. I've sewn just the one shoulder. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to line up my unsewn rib knit collar, pin it in place as well, making sure it's evenly distributed. Connect the two together. From here, I simply fold it over, stitch that together. This is definitely an easier technique, but unfortunately it's going to leave you with a little ridge like this. So I would suggest sewing it down to one side so it sits nice and flat. Options. Look at that. Also, thank you to Christy Makes on Instagram for sharing that second technique with me. First and foremost, get yourself some ballpoint needles. They're perfect for knits and jerseys, and as it says on the back, the ballpoint needle is designed to separate rather than pierce fabric threads. If you aren't fortunate enough to have a serger like I do to get that beautiful, clean, crisp edge, zigzag stitch will do as well. And finally, the challenge of working with a stretch knit itself. Less is more. If I may make a metaphor here, a regular cotton is like a dog. You tell it what to do. Stretch knit jerseys, they're like cats. Suggestions are best, ideas, but let it tell you what it wants. I give it just a gentle tug so it stays nice and flat, but never pull on it hard. I also like to reduce the amount of pressure on the presser foot. I also find it's good to reduce the thread tension a bit. And I find that the fabric does inevitably bubble a little bit when it's sewn, but that's nothing a little bit of pressing can't solve. And when you wash it, it'll shrink back to size and nothing will be wrong. Now I think it's time for a little me time, and let me get some work done on my shirt. And now my final tip is to do the hems first before finishing the garment. So the hems on the sleeves, if you're doing short sleeve, the hems along the bottom. Start by just finishing the raw edges. Press the edge nice and flat. Simply fold over that edge and press it nice and even. Perhaps you might want to measure. And run a stitch along the edge. Just a gentle pull again to keep it flat, but don't want to overwork this fabric. Surprise! One more bonus tip. For the cuffs on the long sleeve, I made them just like the neck, but instead fitted them to my wrist first. Now I'm spacing them out evenly again. Pop's got a new blouse and he's happy with it.
I cannot chase you, I cannot fly, I cannot make you make up your mind. You want me to prove it to you, to see what I lose. If I cannot find you up in the dust, if I stand here waiting, would you think I must stay here for days, losing my way? I'ma go home, I'ma type up my thoughts.